David Park had worked a hospital security for 8 years, but nothing in his experience prepared him for the overnight shift at St. Mary's Medical Center. The hospital had been built in 1923, expanded dozens of times, creating a maze of corridors and wings. But it was the sealed East Wing on the 4th floor that made even veteran staff refuse to work alone after midnight. The wing had been closed since 1987, following what administration called structural issues. But David found the real reason in old incident reports hidden in the security office. 14 patients had died in a single night, all in rooms along the East Wing corridor. Not from illness or accident, but from what the coroner reluctantly listed as simultaneous cardiac arrest of unknown origin. All 14 were found with their eyes open, staring at the ceiling, expressions of absolute terror frozen on their faces. David's first encounter with the East Wing came 3 weeks into his employment. At 2:47 a.m., the motion sensors in the sealed wing triggered. Protocol was clear. Investigate all alarms, even in restricted areas. David badged through the security doors, his flashlight cutting through 35 years of dust and darkness. The corridor stretched impossibly long, far longer than the building's blueprint should allow. Patient rooms lined both sides, doors standing open like mouths frozen mid-scream. The temperature dropped 20 degrees the moment he crossed the threshold, his breath forming clouds in the July heat. Room 401 was where he saw her first. A nurse in vintage uniform, checking charts at the nursing station. She moved with purpose, professionally, until David's flashlight beam hit her. She turned, and David saw her face was wrong. Not damaged or distorted, but wrong in a way his mind couldn't process, as if she existed in more dimensions than 3. "Visiting hours are over," she said in a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. "But since you're here, you should check on the patients. They've been waiting so long for their medications." David backed away, but the corridor behind him had changed. Where the security door should have been was just more hallway, stretching into darkness. The nurse continued her rounds, pushing a medication cart that squeaked on wheels that weren't quite touching the floor. In room after room, David saw them. Patients in their beds, unmoving but breathing, their eyes tracking his movement. They wore hospital gowns from different eras, some from the 1920s, others from the 1960s, some from dates that hadn't happened yet. All of them connected to machines that shouldn't exist, displaying vital signs in languages that hurt to read. Room 413 was the worst. Inside, a little girl sat up in bed, drawing with crayons. She looked normal, alive, until David realized she was drawing him. Not as he was, but as he would be, older, grayer, wearing a patient gown, lying in the bed next to hers. The drawing showed a date, August 15th, 2024. "You can't leave," the girl said without looking up. "Nobody leaves the East Wing. We're all still here, receiving treatment. The nurse says we're getting better, but better from what? We can't remember what's wrong with us. Can you remember what's wrong with you?" David ran, but the corridor had become a loop. Every turn led back to the nursing station where the impossible nurse continued her rounds. The patients were sitting up now, all of them, standing at their doorways, reaching out with arms that stretched too far, fingers that had too many joints. It was the announcement over the intercom that saved him. A voice, clinical and calm. "Code Blue, room 401. Code Blue, room 401. The nurse stopped, turned toward the sound, and for a moment the corridor flickered. David saw it as it really was, abandoned, decaying, empty. He ran toward the security door that had reappeared, burst through, and sealed it behind him. But when he checked the security footage, What he saw made him quit that very night. The cameras showed him entering the East Wing, but they also showed him never leaving. On the screen, he was still there, walking the endless corridor, checking rooms, becoming part of the night shift routine that had been running since 1987. David filed his report and left, but the hospital called him the next week. They'd found something disturbing. In room 413 of the sealed East Wing, someone had discovered a child's drawing. It showed David in a patient gown lying in a hospital bed. The date on the drawing was August 15, 2024. Today's date. The hospital administration tried to contact David to warn him, but his phone had been disconnected. His apartment was empty, as if he'd never lived there. The only trace of David Park was in the East Wing security footage, where he could still be seen making his rounds, checking on patients who shouldn't exist, in a wing that's been sealed for 35 years. New security guards are still hired for the night shift. They're still told to investigate all alarms. And sometimes on the cameras they see David walking the halls of the East Wing, checking rooms, forever part of the night shift that never ends. He looks older now, grayer, wearing a hospital gown just like the drawing predicted. The East Wing remains sealed, but the motion sensors trigger every night at 2:47 a.m. The new guards know better than to investigate. They've heard the stories, seen the footage, noticed that every guard who enters the East Wing appears in two places at once. In the real world and in the sealed corridor, where the nurse still makes her rounds and the patients still wait for medications that will never cure what's wrong with them. Because what's wrong with them is that they're trapped in a moment of collective death that keeps repeating, pulling in anyone who witnesses it. The 14 patients who died in 1987 are still dying, every night, forever, and they need medical staff to attend to them. The East Wing isn't sealed to keep people out. It's sealed to keep the eternal night shift in. But seals deteriorate. Locks fail. And according to the maintenance schedule, the East Wing is due for inspection next month. They'll have to open those doors, enter that corridor, and face whatever has been growing in there for 35 years. Growing and waiting and collecting night shift workers who never get to clock out. Rachel Martinez had one simple rule during her overnight security shifts at Riverside General: never check the morgue after 3 a.m. The rule wasn't written in any manual, wasn't part of official protocol. It was passed down from guard to guard, whispered during shift changes, carved into the break room table. Rachel followed it for 6 months without question. Then came the night when the morgue checked on her. It started with the temperature alarms at 3:17 a.m. The morgue's cooling system was showing critical failure, temperature rising rapidly. Protocol demanded immediate investigation. Bodies had to be preserved for autopsies, for families, for legal reasons. Rachel called maintenance, but Carl wouldn't arrive until 4 a.m. The temperatures were climbing. She had no choice. The morgue was in the basement, accessed through a series of increasingly narrow corridors that felt like descending into the hospital's subconscious. Rachel had been there during day shifts, a sterile, clinical space with bright fluorescent lights. But at night, it was different. The lights operated on motion sensors, clicking on just behind her pace, creating a bubble of visibility in an ocean of darkness. She badged in at 3:23 a.m. The temperature display read 72 degrees Fahrenheit and climbing. The refrigeration units were silent, their usual hum absent. But there was another sound, a rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on metal from inside the storage drawers. Rachel checked the first unit. The bodies were covered, tags on their toes, everything normal except for the temperature. She moved to the control panel to restart the cooling system when she heard it clearly. Breathing. Not from one drawer, but from all of them. Synchronized inhaling and exhaling, as if the entire morgue had become a single set of lungs. The toe tags began to move. Not blown by air, there was no breeze. They swayed in unison like metronomes keeping time to music only the dead could hear. Rachel backed toward the door, but it had locked behind her. The magnetic locks that kept unauthorized people out now kept her in. At exactly 3:33 a.m., drawer 7 slid open on its own. The body inside sat up slowly, sheet still covering its face. It was Mr. Harrison. Rachel recognized the name on the tag. He'd died 2 days ago, cardiac arrest in the ICU. But now he was sitting, head tilted as if listening to something. "You're early," Mr. Harrison said through the sheet, his voice dry as autumn leaves. "The reunion isn't supposed to start until 3:45. More drawers began opening, bodies sitting up, all still covered, all facing the same direction, toward the old section of the morgue, the part that had been walled off in the 1960s after what the hospital called a contamination incident. Rachel's security clearance gave her access to the incident files. She'd read them out of curiosity. In 1963, the night morgue attendant had reported that all 17 bodies in storage had been found arranged in a circle on the floor, holding hands, despite being in various stages of rigor mortis. The attendant was institutionalized. The morgue was renovated, the old section sealed. But now Rachel could see through the wall. Not physically, but somehow her vision extended beyond it, showing her the old morgue perfectly preserved. And it wasn't empty. Dozens of bodies stood in neat rows, all in hospital gowns from different eras, all waiting. Some had autopsy scars. Some were missing organs. Some were just bones held together by will alone. Every night at 3:33, Mr. Harrison explained, still speaking through his shroud, we practice. Practice for the day when the barrier weakens enough. When we can go back up, visit our rooms, see how medicine has advanced. We've learned so much down here, you see. Death is very educational. The bodies from the drawers were joining the ones beyond the wall, passing through it like it was mist. Rachel watched her solid, real morgue overlay with the sealed, impossible one. 2 spaces existing in the same location but different times. A woman in a Victorian burial dress approached Rachel. Her skin was perfect porcelain, too perfect, like a doll's. "You're living," she observed with disappointment. "We thought you were the new attendant." "We haven't had an attendant since 1963. It gets lonely, organizing ourselves." Rachel found her voice. "You're all dead. You can't be talking. You can't be moving." The woman laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of bone. "Dead is a temporary condition in hospitals, dear. We're brought here, pronounced, processed, but we never really leave. Every person who dies here leaves something behind. An echo, a memory, a piece of consciousness that the morgue collects. We're the hospital's memory of death. More bodies emerged from impossible spaces. From inside single drawers came dozens of figures, as if each refrigeration unit was a door to vast halls of the dead. They weren't zombies, weren't ghosts. They were something else. Death's bureaucracy. Still processing. Still waiting for discharge papers that would never come. The temperature display now read 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Body temperature, living temperature. The morgue wasn't malfunctioning, it was alive, breathing with the collective breath of everyone who'd ever been pronounced dead within its walls. "You can stay," Mr. Harrison offered, finally lowering his sheet to reveal a face that was both freshly dead and ancient. "We need someone to manage the files, organize the new arrivals." The work never stops. People keep dying, keep adding to our collective. Someone needs to keep track. Rachel ran for the door, pounding on it, screaming for help. The bodies watched with mild interest, but didn't pursue. They didn't need to. At 3:45 a.m. exactly, the door unlocked on its own. Rachel burst out, ran up the stairs, and didn't stop until she reached the parking lot. She quit that morning, but not before checking the temperature logs. They showed no malfunction. The morgue had maintained a steady 38 degrees Fahrenheit all night. The security footage showed Rachel entering at 3:23 a.m. and exiting at 3:24 a.m. 1 minute later, calm and professional. No disturbance, no awakened dead, no impossible reunion. But Rachel knows what she experienced. And now, every night at 3:33 a.m., no matter where she is, she feels cold. Morgue cold. She sees her breath fog in warm rooms. She hears the synchronized breathing of the collected dead. And sometimes, in the corner of her eye, she sees Mr. Harrison, still in his shroud, holding a clipboard, waiting for her to come back and take the night shift position that's been vacant since 1963. The morgue at Riverside General still has temperature alarms. They still go off sometimes after 3 a.m., but security doesn't respond anymore. They wait for maintenance at 4 a.m. when the sun is closer, when the barrier between the living and the dead is stronger. Because they know what Rachel learned. The morgue doesn't need cooling after 3 a.m. That's when the dead wake up to practice being alive again. Marcus Thompson was 3 weeks into his overnight security job at Memorial Hospital when he first encountered Mrs. Eleanor Vance in room 319. The problem was, Eleanor Vance had died in 1987. Her name was on the memorial plaque in the lobby. Her picture hung in the cardiac ward she'd funded. Yet there she was, sitting up in bed, pressing the call button that hadn't worked in decades. Room 319 had been converted to storage after Mrs. Vance's death. Hospital equipment, old files, broken gurneys. But at night, Marcus's security monitors showed it as a fully functional patient room. Vintage equipment from the 1980s, fresh flowers on the bedside table, and Mrs. Vance looking exactly as she did in her memorial photo, repeatedly pressing her call button with increasing agitation. Marcus ignored it for 2 nights. The day shift never mentioned anything unusual. The room was just storage when he physically checked it during his rounds. But on the monitors, Mrs. Vance grew more insistent. She'd wave at the camera, hold up signs. "Please, I need my medication." "Where's my nurse?" "I can't breathe properly. Help me." On the 3rd night, Marcus couldn't take it anymore. At 2:15 a.m., he went to room 319. He expected to find storage equipment and dust. Instead, he walked into 1987. The room was pristine, smelling of disinfectant and fresh flowers. Medical equipment from the 1980s beeped steadily. And in the bed lay Mrs. Vance, aged 73, just as she'd been the day she died. She looked at Marcus with relief that quickly turned to confusion. "You're not my regular nurse," she said, her voice exactly as it sounded in the dedication video played at hospital fundraisers. "But thank goodness someone finally came. I've been pressing this button for 35 years. Marcus tried to explain that she'd passed away, that this was impossible, but Mrs. Vance laughed. "Don't be silly, young man. I'm quite alive. Feel my pulse if you don't believe me." She extended her wrist, and against every instinct, Marcus checked. The pulse was strong, steady, real. "The strange thing is," Mrs. Vance continued, "no one seems to age anymore. My doctor, Dr. Harrison, looks exactly the same as he did yesterday, or was it last year? Time feels odd here, and the nurses, they come in but never speak, just stare at me like I'm not supposed to be here." Marcus checked the charts hanging on her bed. They were current, dated for today, but in 1987's format. The last entry was from Dr. Harrison at 11:47 p.m. on March 15, 1987. the night Mrs. Vance died. But there were also new entries, dated after her death in handwriting Marcus didn't recognize. They documented impossible things: patient stable despite absence of heartbeat, cognitive function normal, physical form inconsistent, recommend continued observation. The monitor began showing other rooms, not the current hospital, but the hospital as it was in 1987. Patients who'd died years ago were in their beds, all pressing call buttons, all waiting for help that never came. They existed in a bubble of time, the moment before death stretched into eternity, unable to move forward, unable to go back. "We're all here," Mrs. Vance explained, noticing Marcus's horror. "Everyone who died in this hospital with unfinished business. Mr. Chen in 302 never got to say goodbye to his son. Little Amy in pediatrics was waiting for her parents to visit. Dr. Morrison died during surgery, still trying to save his patient. We're all still here, still waiting, still pressing our call buttons." The hallway outside filled with the sound of call buttons, hundreds of them, a symphony of electronic beeping from rooms that didn't exist anymore, from patients who shouldn't exist anymore. Marcus saw them through the doorway, nurses and doctors from different eras, all going about their duties, all ignoring the calls. "But you can see us," Mrs. Vance said, gripping Marcus's arm with surprising strength. "You can hear us. You can help us. I just need my heart medication. The pain is terrible. It's been terrible for 35 years. I've been having the same heart attack since 1987, always dying, never dead." Marcus tried to pull away, but Mrs. Vance's grip was iron. Her monitors began alarming. Cardiac arrest, the same arrest that killed her decades ago. She gasped, clutching her chest, her face contorting in pain. "Please," she wheezed, "get the doctor. Get Dr. Harrison. He'll know what to do." But Marcus knew Dr. Harrison had retired in 1992 and died in 2003. He was probably in some other room, experiencing his own eternal final moment. The entire hospital was layered with decades of death, all occurring simultaneously, all demanding attention from staff who couldn't or wouldn't see them. Marcus finally broke free when the code blue alarm sounded, not from the modern hospital, but from 1987's system, echoing through time. Crash teams from multiple decades rushed toward room 319, all existing in the same space, but different times. Marcus ran, leaving Mrs. Vance to her eternal heart attack. When he returned to the security office, all the monitors showed the same thing. Every room in the hospital, filled with patients from across the decades, all pressing their call buttons, all looking directly at the cameras, all mouthing the same words: "Help us." Marcus finished his shift and never returned. But he couldn't escape. Every hospital he tried to work at had the same problem. Layers of time, eternal patience, endless call buttons. He realized the truth. Every hospital is haunted. Not by ghosts, but by moments of death that refuse to complete, that loop endlessly, waiting for someone to answer their final call. The new security guard at Memorial Hospital doesn't know about Mrs. Vance yet, doesn't know that room 319 is more than storage. But she will. They always find out. And when they do, they have two choices: ignore the call buttons and let the dead suffer eternally, or answer them and risk being pulled into the loop, becoming another eternal patient in a hospital that exists in all time simultaneously. Mrs. Vance is still there, still pressing her button, still dying of the same heart attack. The monitors show her clearly, along with hundreds of others. Their call lights create a constellation of suffering across the security screens, a map of every unfinished death in the hospital's history. And according to the employee records, Marcus Thompson never quit. He's listed as still working the night shift, though no one's seen him in person for months. But sometimes, on the monitors, security guards see him in the halls of the 1987 hospital, wearing a patient gown, pressing his own call button, having joined the eternal wait for help that will never come. Because some hospitals don't just treat the dying. They collect them, preserve them, keep them in an endless state of almost gone, creating a temporal battery of suffering that powers something the living aren't meant to understand. And every night shift guard eventually has to decide, will they answer the calls of the eternal patients, or will they too become one?